Namaskar. MA Philosophy MPY001 block number 6 unit number 1 Swami Vivekanand and Mohammad Iqbal. Objectives. One of the important aims for this unit is to give a gist of the philosophical thinking of both Vivekanand and Mohammad Iqbal. Swami Vivekanand, a great patriotic, dynamic philosopher, as a vigorous religious preacher, finds his place in the history as the one who awakened the people of India from its age-old slumber and infused in it a new life and spirit. He consecrated his life for the spiritual union and upliftment of the humanity with his deep insight. In the thoughts of Vivekanand and Muhammad Iqbal are arranged in an academic and systematic manner. While writing this paper, only those subjects which appear to be philosophical were selected, as their works cover a very large area. The unit provides the students a general idea regarding their stream of thoughts. Introduction. Swami Vivekananda was born in an educated and well-to-do family in Calcutta on 12th January 1863. His father was a famous lawyer, educated and a well-versed person in modern liberal thought and scientific outlook. His mother was pious, wise, and devoted to God. He studied the Western thought, ingrained in him, the quality of critical inquiry and analysis. His inborn spiritual characteristics and his rational outlook were at tussle. He turned towards the Brahmo Samaj, which rejected idol worship and formulated the formless worship of God. His meeting with Swami Ramakrishna in the year 1881 was the turning point in his life. He accepted Swami Ramakrishna as his friend, philosopher, and guide. An extensive travel that he made almost throughout India after the death of death of Ramakrishna in 1886 provided him the opportunity to get acquainted with the social and economical situation of the country. Meanwhile, he participated in the Parliament of Religions at Chicago. This particular meet witnessed the transformation of Vivekanand from an unknown sage to a spiritual and religious celebrity. He founded the Ramakrishna Ashram at Belur near Calcutta. In 1899, he undertook the second journey to the West. He breathed his last on the 4th of July 1902. Sir Muhammad Iqbal occupies a unique position in the contemporary Indian thought. He seems to be the only thinker of the contemporary times who tries to apply academic philosophical standards to Islamic thoughts. Muhammad Iqbal was born in 1876 at Sialkot. He received his early education at Sialkot and Lahore. In 1905, he went to Cambridge. For some time, he did research on Persian metaphysics at Munich in Germany. In 1908, he returned to Lahore and joined the bar as a barrister. He became very famous as a poet. Meanwhile, he also showed a greater interest in his philosophical pursuit. He died in 1938 at Lahore. The reconstruction of religious thought in Islam was one of the important aims of his philosophical thinking. So one can find a greater influence of Islam in the basic concepts and categories used by Muhammad Iqbal in his metaphysics. Persian philosophy also made a great impact in shaping his philosophy. He was also influenced by Islamic mysticism, especially by Sufism. Apart from these, his contact with the Western philosophical world also molded his philosophy. The philosophy of Vivekanand. The philosophy of Vivekanand is born out of his strong awareness of the social, religious, and economic conditions of Indian masses. He realized that the orthodoxy, superstitions, loss of faith in spiritual values, etc., are the reason for the at least some of the social evils. The Hindu philosophy, especially Vedanta, which made him known as the Vedantist, and the Buddhist philosophy made a great impact upon Vivekanand. Along with these Indian influences, he also carried on his thought the influence of Christianity. There were certain other influences too. For some time, he was under the influence of Brahmo Samaj. He also seems that he was also influenced by the personality of Dayanand Saraswati. The Gita was also a source of constant inspiration to Vivekanand, but it must be admitted that the profoundest influence was that of his Master Swami Ramakrishna Paramhans. It is right to say that Swami Ramakrishna revealed him the spiritual path, unraveled and opened his soul, for flooded the spiritual consciousness into his soul, and removed the ignorance which obstructed and covered the wave and tide of the unbounded spirit within Vivekanand. God, cosmos, and human person. The philosophy of Vivekanand is idealistic in the sense that he believes in the spiritual character of the ultimate reality. Vivekanand asserts that his idealism is not unrealistic, but it is a living ideal capable of inspiring and attracting the human being towards itself. Vivekananda's idealism is monistic. He often describes reality in the fashion of the abstract monist. Basing himself on Advaita, he says that reality is one absolute Brahman. According to him, this Brahman is beyond space, time, and causation, and as such, it is changeless. But it does not mean that it remains the same in all points of time. It rather means that the question of time is irrelevant to it. One cannot attribute qualities to the absolute. It is indeterminate. It is indeterminate, but at the same time, an attempt can be made to give a working description of the absolute. He tries to describe the absolute as such Chit Anand. Vivekanand believes that absolute and God are not two. He likes to treat the absolute and God under the same head. Metaphysically speaking, reality is absolute Brahman. The same reality viewed from the religious point of view is God. He feels that the Vedantic distinction between the absolute and God is redundant. It is here that Vivekananda emphasizes the all pervasive nature of God. God is present everywhere and in everything. God is also presented as the one eternal principle. His assertion of God as a human God suggests that the human being bears the sparks of divinity within himself or herself. God is also conceived as the ultimate ideal of life and existence. This ideal can be reached through love. However, the question on the nature of God that Vivekananda speaks of, personal and impersonal God, is a subject of discussion. Many times he describes God as both impersonal and personal, but one who reads Vivekananda has more reasons to tell that he is inclined towards the personal God, but it does not negate his basic loyalty to the Vedantic understanding of God, which speaks of an impersonal God. By way of presenting the personal nature of God, his main preoccupation was to bring religion closer to the common people. The cosmos. For Vivekananda, God is the only real principle, and is God's and creation is God's creation. Therefore, the creation is an aspect of God. Creation can be best understood as the expression of the Creator in infinite forms. Creator in finite forms, but the problem remains unsolved. How has the infinite becomes the finite? He explains that the absolute has become the universe by passing through time, space, and causation. This description of creation implies that in the absolute there was no time, space, and causation. Then where do time, space, and causation come from? If we say that they are independent entities and they are outside of the absolute, it will have a repercussion on the ultimate monastic conviction of Vivekanand. But he solves this problem, showing that time, space, and causation are not metaphysical entities, but they are mere forms, as they are not independent entities. Time, space, and causation are dependent on our mind, and they change with every change of our mind. One cannot have any idea of abstract space or abstract time or abstract causation, so they have dependent existence. Vivekananda reconciles with the idea of Jagat Mithya of Shankara, telling that Vedanta does not assert the unreality of the world, but its Mithyavad. It merely emphasizes that the world cannot have any fixed or absolute character of its own. It asserts that the fact that world does not come out of God as a finished product, and creation is not a completed process. Maya. Vivekananda certainly borrowed the doctrine of Maya from Advaita Vedanta, but at the same time, one can observe that his conception of Maya is not exactly similar to that of Shankara. Vivekananda shares his understanding of Maya with Shankara while telling that Maya is the principle of change, a power that makes creation possible. But Vivekananda disagrees with Advait Vedanta, where Sankara says that Maya is that power which creates illusion. Vivekananda believes that Maya does not necessarily mean being illusionary or unreal. It is right to say that in his philosophy of Maya, Vivekananda seeks to express the essential characteristics of the world as it exists, where he says Maya is not theory of the explanation of world. It is simply a statement of facts that facts as they exist. That the very basis of our being is contradiction. So Maya is a convenient name for the fact of contradiction that the universe demonstrate. Our whole life is of contradiction, a mixture of being and non-being. A places at places in tune with the Vedantic thinking. Vivekanand also says that Maya can neither be defined as existence or as non-existence. Vivekananda places Maya somewhere in between absolute being and non-being. Human person, according to Vivekananda, the real human being is a sort of a concentration of spiritual energy. Man woman is a spirit. Man woman is not what he she usually appears to be. He tells that human is spiritual because he she represents some aspirations and urges which only he she is capable of having. So it is right to say that the philosophy of Vivekananda Nanda presents the human being as an organized unity of the physical and the spiritual, and it is a fact that the importance of body was never undermined in his philosophy. Yoga, the ways of realization. According to Vivekananda, the soul realizes immor- immor- immortality through the process of yoga. It means union, or it also stands for a kind of discipline. The way of knowledge, a Gyan Yoga, the realization that bondage is due to ignorance, is the basis of the way of knowledge. According to Vivekananda, ignorance is the inability to distinguish between the real and the unreal. In other words, it is the ignorance of the real nature of the things. Ways of devotion, Bhakti Marg. This is the way of knowing God through intensity of feeling. Vivekananda says that strong emotions have the capacity to awaken and activate the potential powers of human being. Ordinary emotions can be converted into powerful feelings. Ordinary love can be converted into divine love or supreme devotion. That is the Bhakti Marg. The way of action, Karma Marg. According to Vivekananda, Karma Marg is a system of ethics and religion intended to attain freedom through unselfishness and by good works. Man, woman has to remain in the world and has to keep on working as well as he can. A continuous doing of selfless work enables a person to rise above his herself and to feel oneness with everything, which is nothing but a realization of immortality, the realization of oneness of everything. The way of psychology, Rajyog, it is the way of realization of immortality by controlling the mind and the body. Here the mind and the body are controlled by way of subjecting them to certain physical and mental disciplines. Although Vivekananda speaks of these four ways differently, he says that they are different ways for the realization of the same goal towards universal religion. For Vivekananda, our religions are attempt to get beyond nature. Seen under this angle, religion appears to be synonymous with spiritual realization. Religion is not in books and temples. It is an actual perception. Only the person who has actually perceived God and soul has religion. Seen empirically as a process, it is man's woman's struggle to go beyond nature and to live in the freedom of the spirit. Religion is not the doctrine in dogmas, not in intellectual argumentation. It is being and becoming. It is realization. Basic elements of religion. Vivekananda distinguishes three main aspects in religion: philosophy, mythology, and rituals. First, there is the philosophy, which represents the whole scope of the religion, setting forth its basic principles, the goal, and the means to reach it. The second part is mythology, through which the philosophy is made concrete. These rituals make the philosophy of religion more concrete through ceremonies and various physical attitudes and expressions. In rituals and worship, he finds three elements that are found in almost all religions: symbols, name, and godman. Symbols are means to represent the idea behind them. Holy names are the external expressions of the form. The godman becomes the special instrument by which the divine becomes manifest to us. Unity of religions. All the religions are good since their essentials are the same. Each man, woman should have the perfect exercise of this individuality, but the individualities form a perfect whole. Each religion, as it were, takes up one part of the great universal truth and spends his whole force in embodying and typifying that part of the great universal truth. It is therefore addition, not not exclusion. The ideal to be pursued is assimilation and not destruction, harmony and not dissension. If we want to reach a real harmony, we cannot be satisfied with an attitude of tolerance. Tolerance is a passive attitude. We tolerate error and sin, but we do not have to tolerate religions. Our out attitude should be of positive respect, sympathy, and understanding. Nature of universal religion. A religion is said to be a universal religion only if it is able to fulfill at least two conditions. First, it must be open to all individuals. Secondly, it must provide satisfaction and comfort to every religious sect. Vivekanand is on that opinion that such religion is already there. One fails to recognize its is presence as he is lost in the external conflict of religions. First of all, religions are not contradictory to each other, but they are complementary to each other. Problems arises when each religion concentrates only on one aspect of religion. Secondly, Vivekananda makes it clear that there can be contradictory views of the same thing. We view, understand, and grasp the truth in our peculiar way, but they are basically of the same realities and therefore complementary to each other. By universal religion, Vivekananda does not mean a religion that will have one universal philosophy, one universal mythology, or one universal ritual. The spirit of universal religion demands that one should have the respect for the other ones. A kind of positive acceptance is another important requirement for universal religion. The believer in a universal religion must be broad-minded and open-hearted. At least one element which is common to all religions can be articulated as the element of God. According to Vivekanand, through different religions talk of different aspect of the truth as aspect of the same truth. They are all one. So to Vivekanand, that truth is God. Vivekanand believes that the ideal religion must harmoniously balance all the aspects of religion, namely philosophy, emotion, work, and mysticism. The philosophy of Mohammad Iqbal, nature or of intuition. Mohammad Iqbal is on the assumptions that the ultimate truths which religion and metaphysics seek to emphasize are not known by us in the ordinary way. The ordinary way is the way of experience. In this level, whatever is known under space, time, dimension, and is useful from the empirical and pragmatic point of view. But the reality in itself cannot be directly known in this level of experience. Basing himself on the Quranic idea on heart, he says that the heart is a kind of inner intuition or insight which brings us into contact with aspect of reality. So thereby he presents the heart as the faculty of intuition, and intuition is the way through which reality can be apprehended directly. He also speaks of the important characteristics of intuition. The important character of intuition is its immediacy. Intuition is the immediate knowledge of the reality because it does not require any medium. Secondly, intuitive knowledge is always a unity or wholeness which is not analyzable. In intuition, the knower becomes one with the known, and the distinction between the object and the object disappears altogether. Thirdly, intuition is a movement of intimate relation with the supreme. It is a feeling of the presence of the divine. According to Iqbal, this intuitive experience has an objectivity about it. It is neither a subjective state nor merely a private and personal experience. The object of the intuition is not a mere creation of the individual's intellect, but the object of the experience is really there. Iqbal asserts that intuition is not the property of the mind or intellect, but it is the property of the heart. He also says that the intuitive experience helps one realize eternity in a moment. He further explains that this experience gives a individual a sense of the unreality of serial time Lastly, he speaks of the incommunicable nature of this intuitive experience. It is not communicable because of the simple reason that it is the function of the heart. He also says that through the content of this experience cannot be communicated. A mystic can interpret this experience in terms of verbal form, and this interpreted truth can be easily communicated. Concept of self. Traditionally self is considered as the principle which organizes the activities and the experiences of an individual and gives them significance different from the bodily activities. In line with the traditional understanding, Iqbal also says that the self is the principle of unity in the individual, but he asserts that it not opposed to the bodily. He affirms that the self gives unity even to bodily activities. He develops his idea of self in tune with the Quranic conception of self and prefers to use the word ego for the self. He asserts the necessity to accept the reality of the self. He explains that no mental state can exist in isolation, but there must be a unity organizing all the mental states. Parts of the material object can exist as isolated, but mental state cannot. This principle of unity of inner life of the mental state is called as ego. It is the ego which keeps all experiences organized and united. It shows that it is the ego which organizes and gives a final shape and directions to our various affections and experiences. Iqbal seems to be against the doctrine of parallelism of the body and the soul. According to him, both the body and the soul are systems of acts, and as activities, they are close to each other. The self is a series of activities, and it needs an environment on which it will act or to which it will react. In other words, ego cannot remain in complete isolation. It must have a world. The ego is confronted with the world of non-ego, and it is through his experience of the world of the non-ego that the life of the ego grows and develops. We have seen that all the experience is organized by ego. Such a conclusion leads to one of the important questions in philosophy: does the ego determine its own activities, or is it causally determined by something else? This question is all about the question of freedom. Equal is of the opinion that the ego has the capacity to choose its course of action, and thereby ego is free. Another important character of the self is its immortality. According to him, the self is immortal in spite of its apparent fact of death. He believes that the self has the capacity to survive death, and thereby it is immortal. His concept of God, basing himself strongly on the Islamic understanding of God, Iqbal declares his firm conviction on monotheism. For him, the question of God is more important because it satisfies not only the religious urge of man woman but also her metaphysical curiosity. God as the supreme ego. God as the supreme ego. Iqbal believes that the universe is of the nature of a free creative force. He is of the opinion that the world process is purposive and is rationally directed. According to him, rational egos are capable of regulating and directing their own creative life. So it prompts us to think that there is a being directing the creative line of the universe. So he comes to a conclusion that it is the super ego that guides the creative progress of the world. Here he also explains the Quranic description of God as light. Iqbal thinks that light is the nearest metaphor for understanding the nature of the absolute ego, which is the most perfect embodiment of dynamic and creative life. Attributes of God. While taking about the attributes of God, he makes a distinction between the attributes apprehended by intuitive insight and those known through intellectual deliberations. Here he mainly speaks of the intellectual attributes of God. According to him, creativeness, knowledge, omnipotence, eternity, immanence, transcendence, etc. are some of the main attributes of God. Creativeness. The supreme ego is creative in the way in which an ego is creative. He says that the supreme ego or God is creative in the inner way. It means that God creates completely from within himself. For supreme ego, creation means the unfolding of his own inner possibilities. His creativeness is infinite because these possibilities are infinite. Knowledge for a finite ego or being, the knowledge is based on the distinction between the knower and the known. So the finite being knows the other, which is something different from the subject, but God is all comprehensive. So there is no other for God. In other words, in him thought and deed, the act of knowing and the act of creating are identical. God himself is the object of his knowledge. God creates as he knows and knows as he creates. Omnipotence. Iqbal explains the Quranic understanding of divine omnipotence. The divine omnipotence, according to Quran, is intimately connected with the concept of divine wisdom. One cannot neglect one of the important questions that the attribution of omnipotence to God raises. It raises the question of presence of evil in the world. He solves this problem by explaining the concept of freedom given to human by God for making it possible for him/her to bring out the potentialities latent in human beings. At the same time, human can use this freedom rightly or misuse this freedom for wrong choices. He considers that freedom is a basic requirement for goodness, so he considers pain and suffering as the necessary aspect of the fact of freedom. He likes to treat both good and evil within the same whole. Eternity. Iqbal does not treat eternity as a time concept. He does not speak of an idea of endlessness of time. God is considered eternal because he is the expression of the infinite possibilities latent in God. In this sense, God is portrayed as eternal, immanence, and transcendence. According to Iqbal, God is both immanent and transcendent, but God is not immanent in the world as the pantheist understands. He is immanent in the world in the sense that the world is his creation. God is presented as transcendent in the sense that the God is beyond the grasp of the finite ego. So, by the way of presenting God as a unity of infinite possibilities, the metaphysical demand of human being is satisfied, and by conceiving God as personal and supreme ego, the religious demand is also satisfied. The nature of the world. Like many of the contemporary Indian thinkers who are aware of the present scientific explorations in determining the nature of the material world, Iqbal also asserts the reality of the world. He asserts that the external world exists and is real. Before we enter into the question of the nature of the material world, it is necessary to understand Iqbal's conception of space and time. According to Iqbal, space and time are relative. They are relative not only to the different grasp of being but also to the different levels of experience of the same being. The impression of space and time that we have will be different from the impression of space and time that other animals may have. He further explains that the physical world is understood in the analogy of the self, so the world is conceived as a continuous movement. He also finds that the universe also exhibits a tendency to egohood. The universe manifests a clear tendency to grow as an individual. An individual is a unity of its part, and the parts cannot exist apart from the whole. Iqbal applies the same principle to the universe, where he says that even thought, even though one finds diverse and discrete aspect of the universe, there exists an inner unity among them all. He draws the conclusion by saying that the whole physical world can be viewed as an individual. This is the reason why Iqbal says that every detail of the world is an ego, and the totality of the ego is the ego of the ego. So, if the nature of the world is that of ego, it is nothing but growing. It has a reason, purpose, and a plan, and steadily progress towards the realization of an end. Human density, destiny. Human destiny. In short, according to Iqbal, the realization of immortality is considered as the ultimate human destiny. Immortality is presented both as soul's nature and as a person's destiny. Death is not the end of the soul. The soul survives the death and continues to exist even after death. But this is not all about immortality. One will be truly immortal only when these potentialities are fully and freely expressed. That is one's real destiny. The realization and free expression of all the potentialities is embedded in self. Iqbal asserts that it is through persistent and continuous action one realizes it. It is in this sense that Iqbal represents immortality as ultimate human destiny. Iqbal tries to highlight three points in respect to immortality, which the Quran speaks of. First of all, he says that the finite ego has a beginning. It speaks of the finiteness and humanness of man, woman. The finite ego is a created being, so immortality is that of the immortality of a created being, and therefore immortality does not mean attaining good godhood. Secondly, he says that there is no possibility of its return to the earth. It implies that once the soul is free from the body, a person is free from the bondage of birth and rebirth and awaits the final judgment with regard to his her destiny. So it does not involve a belief in rebirth. Thirdly, states that finitude of the ego is not a misfortune. He criticizes those who are on the assumption that finitude is nothing but evil. He says that the dignity and uniqueness of the individual can be retained only when the individual is approached with its individuality. Let us sum up. Swami Vivekanand has revitalized Indian thought. He identifies his thought with the philosophy of Advait and gives the latter a new form. Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal. The body, life, mind, ego, and the world are illusions. The Brahman is indeterminate, nameless, formless, eternal existence, truth, consciousness, and bliss. Every religion worships the same absolute in different ways. Humanism is the dominant aspect of Vivekananda's philosophy and religion. The religion is expressed in service to humanity, universal brotherhood, and humanism. Iqbal is a mystic philosopher. Intuition alone manifests the truth of God and nature. It gives an organic knowledge. It reveals the nature of ego and helps communion with God. God evolves with the cosmos. He is potentiality. He is potentially infinite and is the conscious force. God is duration and there is no limit for his creativity. The relation between the God and the ego is that of garland with its beads. For him, the external world exists and it is real. The ultimate human destiny is the realization of immortality. Death is not the end and the soul survives death. But often Iqbal is criticized for conceiving God as pure becoming and reducing God's nature to mere fluxual phenomena. Such a criticism has its ground on the fact that if God is ever evolving, he is an imperfect reality and growing towards perfection. Thank you.